Okay.
we already voted on stuff. We had a quorum, we just sped it up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Hey. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jackie Devaney. I'm the chair of the Astoria Pacific Green Party chapter, or it's actually Clatsop County. Sorry about that. So to start, I've got our proposed agenda listed on the board over there. So before we vote on the proposed agenda, just a few opening remarks. First of all, there's no smoking either inside or outside, in case anybody smokes. And is anybody here that's not been to a state convention before? Dan, what's your name again? Sam, okay. So, so when it comes to voting on things, we seek consensus is how we vote. If we don't achieve consensus, then we'll do a majority vote. Also, during discussion periods, we have what we call a stack. So whoever is put in the stack first, that's the person who gets to speak first, and try not to interrupt that person. And the facilitator of the convention reserves the right to put a time limit on each speaker. We have a volunteer to take minutes. Dan, is everybody okay with Dan taking minutes? We use twinkle fingers when we're in favor of something. Okay, so let's vote on the proposed agenda, and then we can get started with reading the, reading the statement of principles and our purpose statement.
I second the agenda.
Okay, all in favor of the proposed agenda? Okay, that's unanimous. So according to the bylaws, the purpose of the Pacific Green Party, it is designed to be a true grassroots, decentralized organization. One of the most significant elements in the American culture we are striving to overcome is the value placed upon domination of other people, other species, and the earth. We encourage our members to participate in community projects, nonviolent direct action, and electoral campaigns. Next is the Statement of Principles. The Pacific Green Party recognizes that our society and government are plagued by inequality, militarism, poverty, and pollution. We envision and strive to create a local-based grassroots democracy that will overcome these societal ills. We declare that all people, when they form a social compact, are equal in right, that all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. And they have at all times a right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such a manner as they may think proper. The Pacific Green Party strives for cultural diversity and gender balance and believes in a limited government whose legitimate functions include ensuring equal rights for all, regardless of race, sex, ideology, philosophy or religion, sexual orientation, age, physical abilities, or economic status. Ensuring that basic human needs, food, shelter, healthcare, and education are met. Promoting an economic structure that creates opportunities for meaningful work. Maintaining and restoring the natural environment for its own sake, as well as for future generations. Promoting energy conservation and the immediate development of renewable and non-polluting energy sources. Addressing the struggle of Native peoples, African Americans, and other ethnic communities who have suffered as a result of government policy in the U.S. Ensuring the right to privacy, including but not limited to the right to reproductive choice. Promoting an open, accessible, and truly democratic electoral process. Achieving peace, justice, and a sustainable environment will require that people work within present institutions while simultaneously creating new ones. The Pacific Green Party respects the diversity of approaches necessary to attain these goals. The Pacific Green Party has been created because of the inability or unwillingness of existing parties to address the fundamental problems of our region and the legitimate needs and aspirations of its people. We accept the challenge of infusing the present system with accountability, future focus, and ecological wisdom. All right. So since there aren't many of us here, at least for Sam's sake, do we want to go around the room with our names, where we're from, and 1 minute or less remark about how we function within the party? All right, who would like to start? I'll start. I'll start. So I'm Jackie Devaney. As I said earlier, I'm the chair of the Pacific Green Party of Clatsop County, which started not quite a year ago. I'm a working mother. I'm also a surrogate mother, and I joined the Green Party because I saw a lot of injustice occurring within other parties, and I wanted to help the Green Party become more organized and to make a difference.
I'm Dan Cooley. I'm from Lane County. I'm the secretary of the chapter there. I'm an eco-socialist, and that's why I decided to stay in the Green Party as it turned eco-socialist nationally. I was the lead phone banker for the Joe 2016 campaign. I have various other sort of secretarial duties, like helping admin the website and other things. Take the minutes here. I always get stuck with that job because I type fast. And that's about all.
You volunteered to do it, didn't you?
Yeah. But,
I'm Alan Zindell. I'm a member of the Lane County chapter of the Pacific Green Party in Eugene. And I'm also on the state coordinating committee and serve as the co-chair.
I'm Seth Woolley. I'm from Portland. I'm also on the coordinating committee. I think I might have some official position, secretary, although we have someone else taking minutes. And so I've been involved with the Portland chapter for about 18 years, I guess. And I'm a software engineer.
My name's Melissa. I'm also up in Portland, an active member of the Portland chapter. I'm on the state coordinating committee. I recently started a new job. It's a resident services coordinator in the Portland area, helping individuals in affordable housing get the services that they need.
I'm Sam Gady. I'm from Portland metro area, live in Cedar Hills. This is my first interaction with Green Party, and I was looking at the website, saw that this was happening, and since I was curious, I figured I would show up. I'm executive director at Northwest Documentary, which is an arts nonprofit that teaches documentary filmmaking in Portland. I just started that job about a month and a half ago, and prior to that, I worked in film production in Portland.
Film production?
Yeah, various roles in the film industry in Portland, so, and commercial industry. There's a lot of Nike commercials. The bread and butter of Portland. So, yeah.
My name is Natalie Pallavicini. I'm also on the coordinating committee. I used to be very involved in the Green Party about 10 years ago, and I took a step back to take care of my family, and I'm getting engaged in the Green Party. Ran campaigns before.
And you pronounced your last name Gabby?
Gady.
might I ask, sorry, how it's spelled?
Gaty. A
also a member of the state coordinating committee, so all 5 of us are here today. It's like- So the first order of business is proposed amendments to the Constitution and bylaws. Alan has primarily been spearheading this, so I think you sent us all an email of your proposed amendments, and you might have paper copies as well, it looks like.
So, it's not exactly accurate that I've been spearheading it, I've actually just done it all by myself, because these are things that over the last few
Somebody's
years,
speaking again?
I've noticed that either we're not following, or that could be problematic, or that are not clear. So I wrote up whatever I thought could be easily changed. Yeah, that's all the copies I think I have. In hopes that we could get some of this fixed today. There is a provision in the bylaws that says wherever possible that amendments to the Constitution and bylaws should be presented at the convention before the convention on which they're voted. And I didn't bring these to the previous convention, but the steering committee discussed by email interpreting that wherever possible clause, which seems to imply that there could be exceptions to this. And we decided that if there was an acceptable reason for not having presented them at a previous convention, and there was not opposition, if they're non-controversial, and I think there was another requirement, but in any event, we thought that in this case, this would be an exception. So we're hoping to do it by a process in which, if there's any opposition, we just vote on whether to send it to the next convention. If that fails, then we'll just drop that amendment. But if there's no opposition to any of these amendments, we'll pass them today.
Go ahead, Natalie.
On the requirement of the river conventions, I would think it would be better to keep to keep a minimum of 2 conventions and not 3, just because of the effort required to organize a convention.
Yeah. Why don't we take them one at a time, and that's coming down the list. And Jackie also suggested another small fix that I've added to the list.
Okay.
And in fact, maybe we could take that one first, just to get started with something very easy.
Okay.
That's in bylaw Article 8. It says they recommend that we start our conventions with a reading of the mission and purpose, but we don't actually have anything that we can find labeled a mission. So we thought we should change that bylaw from saying read the mission statement to read the purpose statement, because there is something labeled a purpose statement.
And if anyone would just like to look at a copy of that, I didn't print out bylaws for everyone, but I can quickly pass it around, and I'll circle where it says mission statement, so that you can all take a look at that.
So the proposal is in Article 8 to change the word mission to the word purpose. Any objections to that? I should let you facilitate.
Okay,
Yeah.
which number are we looking at?
My 8 says abolish the executive committee.
Yes, that's what it says to me.
Or maybe, did I?
This was something we just added this morning, because she wanted to read the mission statement and couldn't find a mission statement, so we realized there wasn't a
Here,
statement of it.
and that,
Our Portland chapter reads the mission and purpose statements at the beginning of each chapter, and we found the mission statement online.
Does it say mission statement? Is it separate from the Constitution?
I think on the website it might be called mission statement.
All right,
we're on the website.
Yeah, we
Going on
couldn't
right now.
find it.
I thought this would be an easy one to start with.
Let me pull up your paper.
The numbering of these changes on that first sheet is the order in which I wanted to
Okay,
address
let's do
them.
that, I'm sorry.
It's not the numbering of the bylaws.
while you're looking that up, I just wanted to make a brief statement regarding all of the other proposed changes to the bylaws. Even though they weren't presented at the previous convention, we have started discussing these by email. They were sent to the PGP discuss list by email,
Yes.
so.
That was the other condition that we had, that it would be disseminated or available to the membership at least 30 days ahead of the convention.
And I believe that at the last convention, we mentioned that that was an item for the next convention.
That's possible. Somebody looking for the mission statement?
I had it on my computer, but my computer is not dead, so.
Maybe we could,
What section of the site is it on? Because I'm on there right now. Is it in the About Us tab? Or is it just a file on Nation Builder that doesn't appear on the site line?
It might just be people reading the purpose as the mission statement.
hi, welcome.
Hello, Tim.
Yeah, I just didn't find anything on the website labeled mission statement. And then the bylaws specifically says mission statement.
Pardon the interruption, but could somebody call Mike Beilstein or George? They're lost downtown.
Oh. Do you have a number?
Yeah, George, 541-207-3291.
They have internet, they have a cell phone?
Huh?
Do they have a cell phone?
Yeah, they said they'd have
541-207.
3291. I'll be right back.
So do we want to save this proposal for the end since,
Yeah, we could do that.
to give us more time to look it up on the website?
I can't
Hi,
find it.
this is Ellen Giselle. Is that one?
Maybe you could change the website, because I just copied and pasted it since.
George, are you
I
lost?
put it into the PowerPoint that
Where
I'm
are you?
using for the Portland's chapter.
If you look in the
On-
statement of principles, the preceding section
Do you have the address?
looks like the
where you're at?
kind of a mission statement.
Right, and now it's called Preamble Purpose Amendments.
Okay, so you wanna go much
Bylaw
further
or
north
one
on
and
Front
two?
Street.
Yeah.
It's
That I
easy to
copied and
pass.
pasted
Yeah.
into the Portland thing.
The address is
But I can pull it.
2111.
My computer instead.
May have been powered
Yeah.
by.
If you have the, yeah, you have it.
All right,
That's the older
The
model.
old model, yeah.
it's on the left. All right, see you, sir.
So we're taking care of some of the business that we don't get to do it over the phone,
All right,
until
so,
people get in.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I figured this was you.
so you wanna go
Would
to,
you like some water or something?
So,
let's go to number 1A.
yes,
Okay, number 1A, the bylaw, Article 19 on the convention and committee process, paragraph G, or provision G, says that the agenda committee will strive to limit the agenda items appropriate for the specific convention. And then further on, it says, Constitution bylaws changes will be handled exclusively at the annual business convention scheduled between February 1st and July 1st. So I'm proposing to remove the word exclusively to free us up to be able to consider amendments to the Constitution bylaws at other conventions. It seems like two things. Number one, I don't see any reason to limit it to a particular convention at one time of the year when a needed change might come up that we want to handle more quickly. And as long as there is agreement to put it on the agenda, I don't see why we would want to tie our hands against doing that. And number two, the same convention that the bylaw is recommending that we, or mandating that we handle amendments at, is the convention at which we nominate candidates to partisan office in the springtime of the even-numbered years. So it may be a lot for one agenda to do both nominations and amendments. So the proposal is to take out the provision that it be handled exclusively, and at this point, simply say, it's recommended that it be handled at the annual business convention, or we could even go further and just not say which convention it has to be at.
At the convention. I think I would say just at the convention, as long as there is proper prior notice. I don't see the need to specify which time of the year.
I agree.
So you're saying just take it out, specifying a particular convention?
Yes, you know, in terms of law and legal stuff, the less is more. The least you tie yourself in, the less you say, the less you specify, the better it is.
The more freedom of movement we might
Yeah.
have.
Because otherwise we put ourselves in a pretzel with people who will just like, oh, you know, the April one.
What's the URL?
Yeah, the simpler the document, the better.
What's the URL used for the
Yeah,
Portland?
I agree with that as well. I think we should be able to make amendments at any convention as long as we have members present to vote.
Yeah. And if something comes up that's really urgent, why would you have to wait until the, the harvest?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, great.
Any other opposition or discussion? Dan?
How precisely are you proposing that it be phrased?
What?
This is at the bottom of the bylaws, it's actually the last one, section, Article 9 or 19G. Bylaws changes will be handled exclusively at the annual business convention scheduled, blah, blah, blah.
I would say strike that whole sentence.
We could say bylaws and amendments will be handled at conventions. Just to make sure that instead of saying exclusively at the annual business convention,
At a convention.
at a convention.
Or we could say at any convention.
Yeah,
Do you want to change the word changes to amendments? Because right now it says bylaws changes will be handled exclusively, blah, blah, blah.
Will be handled at a convention,
Bylaws changes will be handled at a convention.
yes.
and then after convention, it says scheduled between February 1st and July 1st. I would also strike that out and just make it at a convention.
It refers to Article 9, Section B1, so we should probably look at that.
Do we need to vote on this
That
proposal?
part?
Do we need to vote on this proposal first?
Yeah.
Okay. So, can the facilitator,
You can ask for opposition. if
Okay.
anyone opposes.
so someone else would have to make, and I'm sorry,
That's okay.
my mind is drawing a blank. Someone else would have to say aye.
Yeah, they indicate opposition,
Okay,
and if there's no apparent opposition, then we go ahead and vote.
okay. So would someone else have to second that?
I second.
Okay. So you're seconding Natalie to make the change from exclusively at the annual business convention scheduled between February 1st and July 1st to at a convention,
Perfect.
period. Okay. Any other opposition or discussion? No? Okay. All in,
Oh,
Yes.
it's,
so that's unanimous. Okay, so 1B, the same article, the last sentence is this ambiguous phrase, wherever possible, constitution and bylaw proposals will be submitted at the convention or conference prior to the annual convention for introduction and discussion, so that decisions in this regard will be made with proper consideration. Hello, George. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Lou Helder.
Yeah. Seth.
We've got some chairs over here, if anyone wants to be on camera.
Somebody sitting here?
Stop back here.
Well, we were looking for 221 pretty hard.
So?
Is it 2-1 on that?
And just put an extra two.
Oh.
It was $20 away.
So the second part of that same article, the last sentence, wherever possible, it would seem that it would be better to get rid of that wherever possible and make something more specific about how we want amendments handled. And the suggestion that came up in our email discussion to this was to specify something along the lines of amendments that are presented in advance of the agenda deadline for a convention can be passed at a single convention with unanimous consent or consensus without opposition. Otherwise, there would be a vote to put it on the agenda for the next convention, to have the vote at the next convention. Is that clear? It felt like it wasn't terribly clear.
Does anyone else have questions on that? So right now, for those who just arrived, we're on the 10 o'clock item of the proposed agenda. We're discussing amendments to the Constitution and bylaws. And Alan, do you have any more of these available?
I don't think so.
Several.
Yeah, we're sitting there. Those are taken. But you can sit next to Jackie.
Right there, see it?
Okay.
Oh, so it is working. Okay.
And if anyone wants to sit next to me, you can read off of mine.
So that is that the B1 at the end, wherever possible, constitution and bylaw proposal will be submitted at the convention or conference prior to the annual convention
Yeah.
for introduction. Is delete their entire sentence.
Well, we should replace it with something, because there should be some, I'm not sure where it says that there has to be a higher than a majority vote, but the idea was to make it not too easy to change the amendments. So striking that would be fine with me, but we should replace it with some kind of process about amendments, whether we want it at 2 conventions, or if it can be only at 1 convention. And it really would be helpful to know where it says something about the 2/3 vote, but I didn't look that up. So is it clear what we're doing, first of all, what the problem here is?
Are we on 1B?
Yeah, 1B. The last sentence in Article 9, Section G, says wherever possible, bylaws changes will be submitted to convention in advance. The problem is that wherever possible isn't ambiguous.
Are you
So
on the
something more
constitution
specific.
or in the bylaws?
Bylaws.
In the bylaws.
In the bylaws, Article 19,
And it's at the end of B1.
1B is my numbering for the order in which I want it to
Yeah,
handle.
but I have it,
Okay, it's G.
G.
I have a B1.
Article 19, Section G.
Section G, B1.
Yeah, it is.
Section G, and then there is section B1. Oh, never mind.
No, that's
Never-
the,
Section G, yes, I'm sorry, my mistake. And at the end, it's the last sentence.
yeah.
You just want to take out the words wherever possible?
We could do that, and then it means that we're left with, they have to be introduced at a previous convention. My problem with that is that a lot of times there's different people at different conventions. So by having it discussed at 2 different conventions, you can have one set of people liking it at one convention and discussing it and spending a lot of time at the convention. And then at the next convention, there's people there who weren't in on that conversation, and they have more to say, so you take up more time. So the idea was to have 2 conventions consider amendments in order to slow down the process and have fuller discussion. But I think that could also be handled in other ways, like, as I'm suggesting, it can be passed at one convention if there's no opposition. Otherwise, it would have to be passed at 2 conventions.
And you wouldn't formalize that in a document here,
I would,
you would?
yeah. So it's clear and we have to follow it.
That seems more strict than the original.
Okay, you have a suggestion then? I'm open to ideas to fix this.
Well, it seems like you would just remove the discussion of acquiring it at previous conventions.
So strike the whole sentence,
Yeah.
like Natalie said first. Yeah,
I feel like the reason it was put in place was that if you missed a convention, it wasn't this huge thing that was able to get passed without a lot of input. So in order to still be able to have that protection while at the same time not making it ridiculous that you have to get it passed twice, what if, going off of your first one, that states we still have to, or is it the next one? Anyways, we still have to put it up online and share our agenda and everything with so much notice. I think that if we ask, I don't know exactly what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say,
there needs
but
to be proper notice and proper discussion.
proper notice and proper discussion, but what I'm trying to say is no opposition there either. If we want to be able to make it so it is passed at only 1 convention instead of 2, there needs to be enough time for it to be available to people and have no opposition there either. That way we still have the provision of, we don't just show it once and hey, it passes, when there could have been really good opposition, they were just unable to attend that convention.
So in this case, we had it available through our PGP discuss list about 30 days in advance of today's
I think that's
convention.
sufficient, as long, but I feel like there would have to be no opposition in those 30 days in order for us to be able to pass something in only 1 convention.
that opposition could come from anywhere.
I don't really
Well,
like
same with
no opposition
conventions, though.
requirements.
Well,
Yeah,
no opposition from a member. I mean, we have the same kind of provisions at a convention. You have to have been you have to be a Green Party member. You have to have gone to some sort of meeting beforehand for your vote to count. And I think those same provisions should be in place. But that way, it's not just, hey, 1 convention, some valuable voices might not be able to be there. And
But usually you have,
I'm trying to look at the reason it was put there in the first
Yeah.
place.
so
And how
if,
can we
So
still,
I can
Usually-
explain the reason why it was put there in the first place.
well, let's hear it.
so if there is opposition, it usually is, if there's a valid opposition, it usually is not 1 person who is opposed. It is usually a number of people who have something, and we always try to integrate people's opinions and consider those things. And usually it's not the whole group that's not gonna be able to come to a convention.
Sure,
Just
but
now-
it could be one,
Nowadays, you can also have people participating via teleconferencing or, making those facilities available. So I think that while I understand the need to protect minority opinions, we cannot have minority opinions totally stifle and jam the process.
yeah.
And so as long as we're reasonable in offering avenues for input, which we are, then I don't think there should be a problem by being able to pass what's totally administrative matters at a convention. Because really, the work is not passing convention bylaws, it's really going out there and speaking to people. So I'm not concerned about that.
Seth was next, and then Alan after Seth. I'll give you each about 2 minutes.
So the reason why that was put in there, there are a number of things in the bylaws that were put in to have this multiple meeting requirement. It has to do with my understanding is the Reform Party was kind of taken over around the time these were drafted by the far right, the religious right. It was like a Ross Perot thing, and then it became a Pat Buchanan vehicle. And the way he did that was he took all of his church parishioners and took over a convention. And that in itself created a risk. And so there's this multiple meeting requirement now for our conventions, so we know it's coming. Yeah. so I think there was a component of fear as to why some of this language is put in.
Alan?
So there are protections we already have. One is that agendas have to be submitted 30 days before a convention, which would mean any amendments would have to be. And then the only people who are qualified to vote are people who have either donated to the party or been actively involved in the party in some way, plus registered to vote. I was just looking through the bylaws. In the Constitution, it says that amendments to the Constitution have to be passed by a 2/3 vote, whereas everything else is simple majority. In the bylaws, I can't find anything that says that bylaws have to be passed by any threshold beyond, the usual majority. So what I would suggest is striking the sentence and copying the sentence from the Constitution that runs, bylaws may be amended by a 2/3 active approval cast by supporting members at a convention. That would seem sufficient protection.
So you just
I would
upgrade.
agree with that.
Any opposition to that?
Can I get that word for word?
Yeah. These bylaws may be amended by a 2/3 active approval cast by supporting members at a convention.
Alright, so any opposition or further discussion on that?
Before we approve that, do we want to approve the other ones first and then do that one?
What was the other ones?
Well, if we approve that one, then all the rest of us have to be 2/3. I'm just.
Well, what-
Just
That's a
messing
good
with you.
I think
point.
that that's fine. I think that that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's put ourselves to the test.
Okay, would anyone like to second that proposal?
I second this.
Okay, all in favor?
So you're striking the entire sentence and replacing it with what you quoted me?
Yes.
I think that was unanimous, is that correct?
May have been some scan aside.
Stand aside.
Oh, you were stand aside,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you, all opposed?
What?
Is anybody opposed? No? Okay.
Any reason for your stand aside? We're supposed to ask.
He doesn't know
Well,
what the hell
I'm
is
pretty
going on.
new to the conversation. Because, yeah.
Is there any way to rectify that?
Huh?
Yeah, well,
No,
It doesn't matter. It
Doesn't matter.
Stand aside is not gonna hold it up.
not gonna hold it up.
All right, so done with that?
All right,
One can't
we
stand
can move on to number 2.
Number 2 on my list, requirement that every convention be publicized in 3 newspapers of record.
We've not been doing this anyway, so
We've not been doing this.
this should be a no-brainer.
The state law requires us to do that for nominating conventions unless they change the law. But otherwise, it means we spend time and money putting a notice of conventions in newspapers where nobody ever looks and nobody ever reads. So it's just a waste. So the proposal is to change that and instead say, nominating conventions shall be publicized as required by Oregon law. The coordinating committee shall also use the best practical means available to give notice of each convention to all of the supporting members in the entire state at least 30 days prior to the convention.
Any opposition or discussion? No, anybody second?
I second.
I'll second, yeah.
But could you, the last
Sure.
8 words of it,
Read it again. Nominating conventions shall be publicized as required by Oregon law. The coordinating committee shall also use the best practical means available to give notice of each convention to all of the supporting members in the entire state at least 30 days prior to the convention.
And when I hear practical, I hear affordable. You know, it'd be great to send a postcard to every green in the state, and it would also break the bank. So we didn't do an email mostly.
Yeah, email, put it on the website, put it on the Facebook page,
Make some phone calls,
whatever means
At
make
local-
themselves available in the future.
local chapter meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was practical as meant to convey, we'll do our best to get it out there, given the means available.
So really what this does is bring us into conformity with our current practices anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous.
Okay, moving on to point 3, change convention scheduling process. The bylaws currently require, this is in the Constitution. Constitution Article 5 requires conventions held 3 times a year, preferred dates, January, February, Proposal 2, Article 9, bylaws Article 9, I was on the wrong one. Membership meeting. No, wait a minute.
Where are you?
And number 3,
Start again.
we're on 3.
Reboot.
Proposal 3 is Constitution Article 5 conventions. And the final sentence says, the next year's schedule and locations to be decided at the September-October meeting so that preparations can be made in advance. This hasn't been followed in the last couple of years at least, and we've been tending to just plan conventions when we figure out we need to have one and try to get it together. So I thought we should strike that process, trying to plan the whole year ahead of time and institute a different process. And the one I'm suggesting is to, at a convention, decide tentatively on the time and place for 2 conventions in advance, and to finalize plans for the time and place of the convention upcoming.
I think sounds great.
Any questions, clarification needed?
Do we want to have a goal of how many conventions we have in a year? So currently it states, it shall be held at least 3 times a year. Has that been followed? Has it been more or less than that?
It's been 3, but that's the next point.
And
Point 4.
sometimes there have been more, if we have a second nominating convention, for example.
Okay, so
That's item 4 on the list.
then we'll leave that for item 4 then.
So proposal 3 is simply to strike that last sentence about scheduling things at the whole year at September, October.
Yeah,
Yes.
straight out.
So,
I second.
okay, any opposition or discussion? All in favor?
Okay, proposal 4, this Constitution says we should have 3 meetings a year, and the bylaw says we should have at least 2, which, at least 3 would be included, but it would be better if they both said something similar. My original take on this was that I would give deference to the Constitution and have the bylaws changed to say at least 3. But somebody suggested that we could go the other direction and change the Constitution to say at least 2 meetings, conventions a year. And I think that's a good idea from the standpoint that if you need a 3rd convention, you can always schedule one. But to have a requirement of 3 a year, we're spending a lot of time setting up state conventions and less time organizing locally. I really think the emphasis should be on the reverse. We should be spending less time on state meetings and more time on trying to organize things locally.
Any discussion on that? I'm in agreement with Alan and myself. I think it should say at least 2, we can strive for more.
Well, we can do more if we need to. Yeah, that makes sense. Good.
Okay,
So let me read the language that I have here. We may need to change it because I was not thinking about only having 2 a year at the time. So the language I was proposing, at each convention, the date and location, okay, so I've added the process to this one. At each convention, the date and location, in parentheses, city, of the next 2 conventions shall be determined with a final decision on the next convention and a tentative decision on the one following that. The party chaper in a chosen location shall be responsible for selecting a venue and preparing the logistics of the convention. In even-numbered years, at least 1 convention must meet the legal timing requirements for nominating candidates to statewide office. So it does away with the, at least 2 statewide membership meetings. We'd have to go and do a separate proposal for the Constitution to change it to 2 meetings. So why don't we handle that separately?
Why do we need to handle it separately?
Just to make the conversation less confusing. So what I'm proposing right now is changing the process from, okay,
Change the constitution to match the bylaws.
yeah, why don't, we could do that first.
Yeah, let's just make the language consistent,
All
whether
right,
it's 2 or 3 or,
so let's find where that is in the Constitution,
It's under Article 5.
okay?
It's the first sentence, says statewide conventions shall be held at least 3 times a year. So are you proposing that we change the language to statewide conventions shall be held at least twice a year?
Yes,
Okay,
so all we're doing is bringing the Constitution in line with the bylaws.
I'm making it simpler.
And we can still have as many conventions a year as we
And
want.
we can always meet monthly.
any further discussion on that?
Yeah, let's move on.
at least twice a year.
I second.
All in favor?
Okay.
All right.
And the next sentence, preferred dates shall be January, February, May, June, and September, October. We could strike that entirely and leave it up to us when we think is best to schedule.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Any discussion? No. All in favor?
And finally, the last sentence says the next year's schedule and location is to be decided at the September, October meeting so that preparations can be made in advance. I was proposing to change that to, make sure I'm on the right one. At each convention, the date and location, city of the next 2 conventions shall be determined with a final decision on the next convention and a tentative decision on the one following that. The party chapter at a chosen location shall be responsible for selecting a suitable venue and preparing the logistics of the convention. In even number of years, at least 1 convention must meet the legal timing requirements for nominating candidates to statewide office.
That sounds great.
I have one question about that.
Yeah,
So, in other parts of the bylaws, it mentions that the state coordinating committee is responsible for stuff like that. So I think you might be introducing another,
change?
well, yeah, another contradiction.
Well,
Still coordinator.
it says the coordinating committee would set up an agenda committee. I'm not sure, well, no, it says that, the decision about when to schedule conventions will be at the convention in September, October. So it wouldn't be the coordinating committee's decision, it would be the convention's decision according to the bylaws now.
Yeah. A new, well, yeah. But the coordinating committee convenes the statewide membership meetings. That,
I think I know what you're talking about, Seth. I think it's under officers.
and then, yeah, there's the responsibilities of the SEC list.
I don't see it under.
I don't think that it necessarily contradicts in that we propose something that is approved at the convention.
Okay, well, I just remembered,
Let me see.
I'm
if I
sorry,
Hold it
which
up.
part are you saying contradicts? I'm gonna-
In last year. So, maybe just to paste and copy for words and search. Change.
Okay,
So-
so the executive committee sets the agenda for state meetings.
Okay, here it is, it's in the Constitution. Article 4, C, 4C. One of the responsibilities of the coordinating committee is scheduling and conducting state conventions.
Yeah, that's what it was. I don't know how I remember that.
So we could simply strike the word scheduling and leave it to the coordinating committee to conduct the convention.
We were gonna be here next convention, but doing that same change.
So where we're at,
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that conducting state convention, just leaving it as conducting state convention is fine, because we do coordinate, I mean.
so the proposal then is get rid of the sentences that indicate the conventions are supposed to be all scheduled at the same time, and replace it with the language that I read. And then at the same time, change the Constitution to delete the responsibility of the coordinating committee for scheduling conventions.
Here we go.
Is that clear?
Any further discussion on
Yeah,
that?
can you just explain to me what the word was and what we're changing it to?
Right. The old language is, the coordinating committee shall convene at least 2 statewide membership meetings each calendar year, including at least 1 convention scheduled between February 1st and July 1st, and an even number of years, including at least 1 convention that meets the legal timing requirement for nominating committees to statewide office. So we're gonna change that. Drop that and add this, K5. At each convention, the date and location of the next 2 conventions shall be determined, with a final decision on the next convention and a tentative decision on the one following that. Party chapter chosen location shall be responsible for selecting a suitable venue and preparing the logistics of the convention. In even number of years, at least 1 convention must meet the legal timing requirements for nominating candidates to statewide office. And we changed the Constitution to take away the responsibility of the coordinating committee to schedule the convention.
So the convention committee is now responsible for the logistics of the next convention?
Yeah,
And
and
that
that
just
would
means
be,
the location and refreshments and stuff like that, or?
that would be the local chapter,
Okay. And then what is the state coordinating committee responsible for each convention?
conducting the convention, which means we make sure that there is an agenda and that we have a facilitator and things like that.
I have 2 hands up. I'm not sure who's first.
I just wanted to point out for those who don't know or haven't noticed, the text of all these proposals, for most of them, this was on page 3 of this thing that Alan handed us all.
Yeah, no, I only copied a few of those, so there aren't copies of all of them.
Yeah.
Oh.
So if anybody has a copy, I suggest you share with your neighbors so that you can. And then, Mike.
I'm concerned about this, responsibility of chapters for hosting because, do we even have chapters?
We do now,
Okay.
we have a few.
How many chapters are there? But, there's also, there's a possibility of, say we wanna, have the convention in Bend because we have some active members there. We don't have a chapter in Bend.
Mhm.
So is it?
Could form a chapter.
Okay, well, I'm just, I think the only place that has had a continuous chapter for like the last 15 years is Benton County, Lynn Benton County. And, and so, there's been lots of times when there hasn't been a chapter in Salem, there hasn't been a chapter in Eugene.
But looking at the future, we're gonna have parties, chapters everywhere.
Okay,
Well, we could change the language from the party chapter to active members in a chosen location.
I
I
agree
like
with
that.
changing it to active members.
I like that.
Yeah,
That works.
yeah. So is everybody clear on that? Instead of making it the responsibility of the local chapter, it would be the responsibility of local active members.
And it's happened that way actually a number of times. Again, our practice and our constitution have been loosely interpreted, to put it mildly.
Chapters,
And so that's in the Constitution or in the,
This is bylaws,
I have both documents up on everything.
Article 9, replacing that.
I have a concern though, and it's basically very similar with Mike. A lot of our chapters are not very big or not very active, and to put all that's a lot of responsibility to, is there a way to share the responsibility or?
Well, lately, I've been shouldering most of the responsibility for making sure the conventions get done.
Which is why it would be good to share the responsibility
Yeah.
from that perspective as well.
And I'm thinking, where we have an active set of people, would be a good place to have it, because they're in a position to scout out venues and sign contracts and things like that. Whereas doing the Salem thing, the idea was try to bring in people from Salem, which I don't think we've done. But it was really hard finding people who could look around at venues here. So I think it's better to have people on the ground responsible for making sure this comes about. And I think if they were falling on the job, then it would fall to the coordinating committee to make sure it happens.
Couldn't that also just be fixed by claiming for the Portland chapter to be the convention committee?
So you're asking to change the wording for that, for like local active members to convention committee?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of not much different. I think that they're kind of what you're saying, but it is wording it differently in the sense that, there's still the responsibility, managerial role, if you will, for the state coordinating committee to make sure that things happen, but, to allow the local chapters to be in charge of the logistics would be for them to be the convention committee. I just think it's a,
Can we just make it put it back to the SEC as schedules it, but, we know they can delegate? Like why, maybe it doesn't need to be put into our,
Strike that sentence, that one sentence I proposed.
just leave it to the SEC is ultimately responsible.
Okay,
But then
Well,
they'll
leave it-
delegate, the SEC will then just delegate to the local chapter as a matter of standard administrative policy. So it doesn't have to be in the organizational documents.
that's true.
yeah.
So what are you proposing for a change?
So the proposed change here, I would just strike the sentence about the local people being responsible. And then it would be our understanding that the coordinating committee would continue to be responsible for scheduling it, but they would, not scheduling it, we still
The
want to change
convention's
it.
still responsible for scheduling.
But the coordinating committee would choose people in the location to do it. And if they didn't, then they would find somebody else.
Is it in the bylaws?
Once,
Any other discussion?
So this is a change in the bylaws to, I'm sorry, I'm very hot. It's a change in the bylaws? I'm just trying to keep track of the changes.
This is changing the bylaws, and it is dropping, it's in Article 9, membership meetings. Drops Section B, which is about when you do this coordinating committee convene at least 2 statewide membership meetings, at least 1 convention, blah, blah, blah. And replace it with this. At each convention, the date and location of the next 2 conventions shall be determined with the final decision on the next convention and tentative decision for the one following that. In even numbered years, at least 1 convention must meet the legal timing requirements for nominated candidates to statewide office.
Okay, and we'll leave the Constitution alone, so the state coordinating committee is still the overseer of that scheduling.
We're still eliminating the scheduling part.
Yeah,
Oh,
because the scheduling would be done at the convention.
This is a question of the venue, of the logistics.
okay. Okay, any other discussion?
yeah. I've got a question then and a comment. We are eliminating the chapters have to host. Is that part of this or no?
We're eliminating my proposal that the chapters have to host, which isn't currently in the bylaws.
It's not in the bylaws.
It's not in the
We
bylaws.
don't want it in the bylaws,
Yeah.
from my perspective. Okay,
Yeah.
good. And I just want to throw out a very quick anecdote. In 2000, Jackson County did not have an active Green Party chapter. It had a number of active Greens. It had a very active Nader for President group. But the active Green picked up the phone and called Blair and a couple of other people and said, let's have a convention down here, I'll organize it, get it all together, you don't have to do a damn thing. They said, great! And it happened. And that happens on occasion. It's happened in Coos, it's happened in a few other places during the last 20 years. So, anyway.
And Dan has something.
Well, just for the notes then, Alan, you're suggesting just the first, in this paper here, the first part of your change to A5, and then everything from the party chapter onward, the changes about the party chapter being responsible is to be struck?
Just that sentence in the middle, the last sentence would stay. the last sentence.
Okay, so any even number of years that stays, all right, this is
Yeah.
the party chapters then.
Okay. Any other discussion? Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Dan seconds. All in favor?
That's how the sausage is made.
Along with that, the title of that article is membership meetings, and it's really all about conventions. So my proposal is to change that wording from membership meetings to conventions, for clarity.
Aren't there a lot of other places where it mentions membership meetings also?
And the same, I read them through pretty carefully.
That was the only instance?
Yeah, it's all about conventions.
So you wanna change it so that a chapter meeting counts?
I want to change the title of the bylaw from membership meetings to conventions, because that whole article is about conventions.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought,
That's bylaw Article 9. I think we talk about other chapter meetings in a different part of the bylaws.
but aren't chapter meetings also considered membership meetings? Like if you look in the section of the bylaws where it talks about members and memberships, I feel like it mentions membership meetings there, where it decides, it claims that membership meetings would also include, the chapter meetings.
Well, look at this, it's Article 9, membership meetings, A, conventions, and then there's a whole list of A's under conventions, then B, meeting minimum requirements. Coordinating, and this is the one we're changing, coordinating committee shall convene at least 2 statewide membership meetings each calendar year, so it's talking about conventions.
Okay,
So,
so
and so change that word to conventions?
Yeah.
Yeah, change the title to conventions.
I actually think it's saying something slightly different. I think it's saying you can have conventions, and then you can have membership meetings,
Statewide.
statewide membership meetings, but the two may be different.
Oh.
And hence the notification requirements for conventions doesn't apply to those statewide membership meetings. So
What I suggest is, we can always put the
we
sentence.
just call them conventions,
Yeah.
We can, yes, conventions.
since we
Well,
removed the requirement.
I don't know, I wanna say something to that, because a convention requires a lot of planning, including getting your local chapters to try to get involved, and it's a lot different than, a membership meeting to me is just a meeting that allows that to count as a meeting, so that you can then vote at the next one. So if there was something that, as a coordinating committee, we get together and said, hey, we're gonna have a meeting, if other people wanna come, that's great, it's gonna be simple, but we're gonna make it in Eugene, this date, really, really simple, we don't have all the hoopla and hoops to run through and anything, we'll have it down in Eugene at the Home Market. Anyone's welcome to come, that to me would be a membership meeting, that didn't require us going through this, we've decided it two conventions way in advance. We should be able to hold that, reserve that right, as the 5 of us to decide, let's meet in person. Anyone else is willing to come too, but let's meet in person, how about next weekend? That to me would be a membership meeting, and we should be allowed to have those.
Changing this wouldn't, prevent us from doing that.
True, but this is just talking about those membership meetings, that would count.
The only section of this article that talks about membership requirements is the one that we're currently changing, or we just changed. And it says, coordinating committee shall convene at least 2 statewide membership meetings each calendar year, including at least 1 convention scheduled between February and July, and an even number of years, including at least 1 convention that meets the legal time requirements. So it really isn't saying anything about having statewide membership meetings, it's just talking about conventions. And if we change that particular, which we just did, if we change that particular language, the whole article is about conventions.
I feel like I'm agreeing with you that they were 2 separate things, but to change that would take it away and say we don't have to have membership meetings, but we do have to have our 2 conventions that we've already voted on.
If we delete the membership meeting words from this, it doesn't prevent us, there's no prohibition on membership meetings. So if you just make this article all about conventions, the SEC can just go, we're gonna have a membership meeting.
Right, what I
Yeah.
was saying is it would take away the requirement for us to have a membership meeting that was separate from the convention.
Do you support
Correct.
the change? Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't wanna require having membership meetings if there's no need for it.
Correct, I just want to make sure that that's what I
Okay.
understand.
We're all clear.
So the proposal is to change the title of the article
Title of Article 9.
from membership meetings to, conventions.
I second.
All in favor?
Thank you, Melissa. For the clarity.
All right. So, how much time we got? We're going to 11:30? Wow, we might actually get something done.
Yeah, we've got about 42 minutes left.
Okay, Proposal 5, Article 16 on chapters, Section J. Each chapter shall submit a roster of its members to the party secretary every 6 months. That hasn't been done.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah.
Before you get going? I think you're gonna propose changing the requirement from 6 months to 30 days before a state convention.
Yeah.
But I think we should just eliminate it because under the new, the Secretary of State has a statewide voter list system, and the state already has a roster of every member. The only thing, it would make any sense, like, there's also these supporting members that chapters can have, but many of them may not even have them, so I'm not sure we need a requirement at all
Mm-hmm.
to do notifications where the chapters have to remember a particular date, they have to send some sort of list. It seems,
My chapter's already filled on.
I don't know, I actually think, I mean, I did this, I have a list, but as far as members, I guess that word could be ambiguous because we have different events that we've done, that we have names that they're not necessarily any party affiliate, but they would be interested to know when this was, because that's how we're gaining new people, is constantly letting them know when conventions and stuff are happening. So, what was it, a month or two ago, I gave a list of 450 names to Tricia. I'm sure she already had most of them, like you said, but I'm sure that there were some that she didn't. And I think that that's good for her to be able to have all of those before the convention, because she can send out her newsletter and mass email.
but those are contacts.
Their
In addition
contacts,
to
correct,
members.
which is why, exactly.
So we have a definition of members that is something like registered members, plus there's this also supporting member thing.
Yeah.
And so,
And only supporting members can vote.
yeah, the reason for something like this is so that we can know in advance who the supporting members are. Even though it doesn't actually say who the roster of supporting members in this provision.
Dan,
It's kinda
did you
weird.
wanna, are you done, Seth? Sorry. Okay, did you wanna add something, Dan?
We're pretty well organized in Lane County, and I don't have a list of our supporting members. It would be actually quite a chore to look back over everything we've done over the past year and assemble a roster. I don't know how many chapters actually would have one. Would be-
You both raised your hand at the same time. Who'd like to go first?
Go ahead, Alan.
Well, the helpful thing about having a list from chapters is this, so the people planning convention can know in advance of those showing up who's qualified to vote. Because the supporting membership requirement is either you've given a donation, which we can check through our treasurer, or you've been active in, contributing to the party with some kind of work, which would usually means showing up at meetings or taking part in electoral activities. And the people who would know that would be the party chapter leaders, the co-chairs. So the idea was, in advance of the convention, if we could get a list from you of people who have actually been active in your chapter, then we'd have a better idea who the supporting members are.
I think you were next, and then Melissa, and then Natalie, so.
Yeah, I'm really opposed to this concept of supporting member just because it's too hard to keep a record of that. And there are certain things like a nominating convention, we can't prevent non-supporting members, that is, someone who's registered as a green, we can't prevent a registered green from voting at a nominating convention. It's only for other issues besides nominations that we can. I think the distinction is too difficult. And, so if we have a roster of registered greens in the state, I think that should be the qualification for participating at a convention. I think we're just creating an unnecessary and an unhelpful thing to even have this concept of a supporting member. I think the fact they show up at a meeting is enough to convince me they're supporting.
Okay. Melissa, Natalie, and Alan.
So I guess I just wanted to, I don't know if we've spoken with Tricia about this, if we switch it up, to me, that seems like that's 30 days for everyone in the state to get all of their information to Tricia, and now she's got 30 days to go through and make sure everyone is a supporting member. Whereas before, if it was every 6 months, there's a lot less pressure to try to get through everyone in the state within that 30-day timeframe. I mean, it's, I feel like it left her a little bit more time to kind of go through it and yeah, that's all.
But nobody's ever
Oh,
done
is
it.
that now?
Follow the order.
Yeah.
Since we're having 2 conventions, we're gonna get like an updated list at least twice a year, that's kind of 6 months. But I do agree that a 30 days prior to the convention is a short window, I would say 60, 60 days, 40 days. We're gonna have the date of the convention set at the convention, so we can just remind the chapters to update their list and send it 60 days to months before.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Alan, then
First,
Seth.
to Mike's point, to get rid of the supporting member requirement is a whole different section of the Constitution bylaws, so as long as that's there, we've got that to deal with. And what's actually been happening is, nobody's been following the 60-day requirement. What happens is we get a convention scheduled, and then Tricia and I scramble around to figure out who's a supporting member and who's coming, and it's hard to get RSVPs anyway. So 30 days seems, you got the convention in mind, and people are thinking about it, and we can start to plan it. 60 days is like way ahead, and you put it off, and, won't get done. So my thought is at least 30 days would be better than what we're doing now, which is just leaving it on a couple of people to try to figure out who's qualified.
What about 45 days?
The haggle, we're in for the haggle. Split the difference.
A month and a half.
Seth, did you still have something to say?
Oh, I basically said it.
Okay. And
George,
George.
I am very strongly in favor of what Mike said for several reasons. First of all, look around the room today. There's 14 of us here. The largest convention I've ever been at had 50 or fewer. We know, somebody in the room always knows somebody else. You either are or you aren't a supporter, you either are or you aren't a registered green. I think we're discussing something we don't need to even consider anymore, whether a person's a supporting or non-supporting member. Let's just let those who are greens who are interested enough to attend the convention in the first place participate and be done with all this discussion, whether 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, a list that nobody ever makes lists, does. That's my statement.
And then Mike and Natalie.
Oh, I was just, another problem with the supporting members, who's gonna certify as a supporting member if they're not part of a chapter? And certainly there are a lot of Greens who are not a member of a chapter, because there's no chapter organized.
Yeah. Natalie. And then Dan.
I empathize and I totally understand where you're coming from. We want the widest participation possible with the list restrictions. And for the nominating convention, we have the list of registered Greens from the state. Some of them may have never shown up, or we may not even know who they are. And they need to be invited, they need to know and be able to participate in the convention, the nominating convention, no matter what. On the other hand, to change the bylaws, to change our party structure, to really have an impact, we need to have people who are committed to the party, because it's very easy to have, like what Seth was explaining before, a congregation of 500 people descend on a convention and just totally change things from the Green Party. So there is also, that aspect that needs to be considered. So the requirements for nominating and nominating candidates and the nominating conventions, I'm pretty sure they're pretty much set by state law, and there's nothing that we can change that. But the requirements to change how we operate can be done by people who are active at Green Party. And the definition, what you're talking about is maybe having a better definition or having a definition who we consider a supporting or an active Green Party member. And it doesn't need to be super restrictive, but it needs to be people who have a certain commitment.
I saw Dan, then I saw Melissa and Alan.
I agree with George and Mike that this is really a big deal as far as verification, but I think that the concept of supporting member is needed because most registered Greens are most voters are lazy, they don't have money to pay people, and you gotta have incentive to get people to do things.
I kind of added to that, because a supporting member is someone who either supports the party via money or in-kind donations, and we need those things in order to even have a party. You can be supportive with your presence and your votes, but we don't have a party that way. So, and it does give incentive for those supporting members to either do something or to provide financially.
Alan.
So the proposal on the table was about submitting the roster of supporting members. If we were going to change the requirements about supporting members, we'd have to go through all the Constitution and bylaws and figure out where it talks about that and reword everything. And this was not a change that was put on the agenda or anybody had a chance to discuss before now, leading up to this convention. In addition, I think it's probably gonna be a more controversial change that people outside of this room, even if we could agree here, might not like the idea and say, where did this come from? So my proposal now would be this particular article, each chapter shall submit a roster of its members to the party secretary every 6 months. I forget who said it, but why don't we just strike that and forget about it? And then it can be a matter of practice rather than a bylaw to come up with a list of people who are supporting members who are qualified to vote at a convention. It'd just be something the coordinating committee would make sure happens.
Okay, so I have my hand up, but you're before me, so.
Yeah, it's encouraging to me to see, recalling some former discussions of bylaws. I remember, and I do think I remember a convention that had 100 or so people at it. But, it's encouraging to see various things being processed and getting through. I would be very surprised if all of the housekeeping that hasn't quite kept that way in the last 20 years got covered in one convention and one bylaw adjustment. I think it's reasonable just to leave a certain amount of contradiction, a certain amount of undone stuff undone, move on, and get as much as we can taken care of.
Okay, and then I wanted to add, perhaps the wording could be, it is at least suggested that each chapter submit a roster of supporting members.
Or recommended.
Or, yeah, it's recommended. So that way, if that chapter doesn't get it done, they're not necessarily penalized, but they should be doing it. Because we know that many chapters aren't doing this, but I think it would be a good idea to leave that in as a suggestion. And Alan, or Seth, did you have something you wanted to say, and then Alan?
I was just proving that.
Oh, okay.
eliminating altogether.
Okay, Alan.
If the chapters submit a roster, it's not gonna because it's in the bylaws, it's gonna because somebody
Ask them.
asked them to do it. And so I'd rather just leave it as a practice for the coordinating committee or the secretary or somebody to remember, okay, we got a convention coming up, we should check who's a supporting member.
Okay.
So I go back to, my proposal is just to strike that section J.
I second.
Okay, any other discussion? Natalie?
I'm looking here at the bylaws and there's several places where there's like supporting member, supporting member, supporting member. So I think that for future convention, we may want to revisit and form a small committee to review that. Because I can appreciate both. We want as much participation as possible, but we also want some order within the party.
Okay, this
Yeah.
doesn't really have much to do with the support supporting members, this is just.
Yeah, so what Alan suggested earlier is we're gonna leave the idea of supporting members alone. And right now, we're just voting on whether we keep it in the bylaws that a roster be submitted. And instead leave it up to,
I think submitting a roster on a regular basis is a good idea to help coordinate statewide.
But it
Take it
doesn't have to
to a
be the
vote.
bylaws.
yeah, so in practice, that's something we could still do, but we can just take it out of the bylaws, is what Alan's suggesting.
Don't like it?
Okay.
No.
Okay,
Why don't we just move on?
yeah, so let's go ahead and,
We're not gonna vote on it,
Well,
Well,
we have an objection.
yeah, we have an objection.
so that means you
I
don't
think
vote?
that putting a recommendation is good. It says here, a chapter may set its own membership requirements.
Yeah,
And we can just put, it is suggested to send a roster 45 days prior to the conventions.
I thought you just needed 2/3 vote.
well, yeah, but we agreed that we were gonna do this by unanimous.
Yeah, but I can maybe stand aside, I don't necessarily need to oppose.
No, you
I
can
will stand
oppose, you're
aside.
allowed to oppose, I'm not trying to find.
No, stand aside is fine, I'm not.
So can I clarify for my own brain? We are, again, I think, just trying to bring bylaws into our already pretty much established practice, which is the chapters are not regularly getting it together to send lists off
Yeah.
before the convention, because there's nobody in the chapter that particularly wants to sit down and do that work. And when the chapter gets together to have a couple guys ride, or girls and guys ride up together in a vehicle, we know who we are, and we're either activists or we're interlopers. And I can attest to Delbert and Mike and Tim being activists down in my county. So this is an easy support for me.
okay.
And I'm sorry I went off on the tangent, I followed Mike off on the tangent about supporting membership, because I've always thought that was kind of fuzzy and hard to apply and hard to figure out and hard to verify and everything.
Okay, so are we gonna vote?
Is there opposition?
I stand aside.
Okay,
Okay,
so
So-
we're voting to strike that section J.
Yeah.
okay.
All right, we're getting there. Proposal 6. There's two different places in the Constitution bylaws about when agenda items for conventions should be submitted. One says 30 days, the other says 45 days. So my proposal is to delete the requirement for 45 days and leave the other section that's 30 days.
But I feel like the 30 days is when the agenda needs to be submitted to the public. So for 40, it makes sense to me for it to be 45 days for an individual to submit it to the state coordinating committee to say, I want this on the agenda, because then that gives 15 days for the state coordinating committee to decide where to fit that in, to the agenda of what this individual said that they want. I think that it's a good idea to keep it 45 days.
Let me take a look at the article. Article 19, Section B, Agenda Committee.
I'm in agreement with Melissa on that one.
And we passed something already that we don't have to put it into 3 newspapers, but as long as we've followed state law and we've put it out there, and people know that there's an agenda that's gonna be, a convention that's gonna be coming up, before that 45 days is up, so that they know, hey, there's a convention coming up, I have 45 days from that day to submit something I wanna be talked about. And that gives the state coordinating committee or the convention committee 15 days to fit it into the agenda to get it approved by the public.
Well, let me read this part. Okay. The other section says, the agenda committee will make a sincere attempt to include all items submitted for proper process, subject to the time allowed for the convention. The deadline for the submission of items by committees to the agenda committee for each convention will be no less than 30 days before the convention.
I wanted to point out what the bylaws are actually trying to say. 19F10 is saying So it's trying to set up a two-tier
Correct.
system for agenda items to get into the convention committee. I'm totally fine with deleting F10 because we never do that anyways. But we could change it to 45 days in the other section.
What is F10?
This
That's
is,
the bylaws agenda item.
Okay, I don't have it.
this is,
Yeah, I'll read it. It says, agenda items for conventions may be sponsored by committees or individuals. Items sponsored by individuals other than party coordinators must be submitted to an appropriate committee for seasoning at least 45 days before the convention. The committee will review items for appropriateness and completeness of thinking and documentation. That's the one I'm suggesting we delete.
Yeah, so
But I feel like
that
it
did
says the
happen
same
this
thing.
time around though, like some people sent out some emails asking for things to be added to the agenda and then,
It gave us an opportunity to discuss it.
yeah, so I'm in agreement with leaving that
So my
bylaw as is personally. Any,
There was no committee for seasoning, it was just me putting it on a discussion list.
But it was
no,
for-
it wasn't a committee, but it was certain
A
individuals.
member of the coordinating committee.
Yeah. So certain individuals asked for things to be added to the agenda, and then they were added before we,
Finalized.
before we finalized it as the SCC.
So you're asking for, this deadline for submission to be changed from 30 days to 45 days.
Well,
It
it
already
already
is
says
45.
45 days.
With
I'm saying leave
B2,
it.
There's two tiers. There's 45 for the individual and 30 for the coordinating committee members, right?
And
it says deadline for the submission of items by committees to the agenda committee for each agenda convention will be no less than 30 days before the convention.
Right, because they've had that 15 days to take individual submissions.
Well, that would be the agenda committee though.
They
Yeah,
said
to
that
the-
they
to
could give it
the
to any
agenda.
kind of committee. They could give it to a coordinating committee
It could
or
be
a
elections
regular
committee,
committee, it could be any kind
Any
of committee.
committee. It looks like
That's
this,
how I'm understanding.
I think we need to table this for the next convention because it clearly is intended to be a two-tier system and going into that
It
seems
would
like.
take time.
yeah, so, and did you have anything you wanted to add though? And I'm sorry.
Yes, that's why I raised my hand.
Oh, okay.
Today, if I'd gotten here at 9:15, it could happen, and I said, I've got something I'd like us to consider for today's agenda, and we had a very brief discussion, and then at least 50% of us said, yeah, that should be on today's agenda. That would happen, yes?
No,
Because-
it would go under discussion, general strategy. and-
Okay, so at many, many Green Party conventions in the past, given a facilitator like me, that has happened. So I would like that, if it has to be codified, that we're only gonna have 45 or 30 days, period, before convention. I would not support that even a little bit, and I would vote to block.
So it's my,
Seth and then Melissa.
it's my understanding that the agenda that goes in advance is a proposed agenda, and the convention always then approves the agenda. So any member could come to a convention and say, I want to throw something on the agenda, everyone else can discuss it during the agenda forming process, and they can approve it. All of this extra stuff is just for setting the proposed agenda.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
And I think that's going to what I'm saying is even when you do that, your proposed agenda, you still have to have some sort of guideline and timeline. And you leave room on the agenda for discussion or new items. You know, I think that's why I was pointing that would happen at that allotted time. Is, okay, you're bringing something new, you didn't do the 45, 30 day, whatever it is. So we have allotted time in our convention for us to bring up these new ones.
If everyone else agrees.
Yeah.
And Mike,
I'd like to, maybe I've got some questions that you can answer, but it seems to me, we talk about in the agenda committee, but the agenda committee is just really the steering committee, correct? So the steering committee is the one who sets the agenda. requirement of things being brought to the steering committee a certain time before the agenda is set. I don't think that's really necessary. I think if, you can take things to the steering committee at any time. If you give it to them one day before they're gonna set the agenda, and they have time to meet and decide on it and put it in the agenda, or decide not to, then I think that's fine. I mean, so you don't really have to have this two-tiered. It's just basically whenever things come to the steering committee, they can decide whether to put it on the agenda for the convention. And there's, I don't think there needs to be a requirement that it has to be a certain, time before that. And it's up to the steering committee to decide how much, how important it is, how timely it is, whether they should include it in the agenda or not. Anyway, so I don't see a reason for this tiered approach.
And then Melissa, Natalie, and myself.
For regular practice, I would agree with you. The reason I don't agree with you is there are certain individuals that need to see things in writing and have a specific role, and are going to feel slighted if, let's say, they only gave you 3 days and you didn't have that 3 days. Like if they went to a coordinating committee member with 3 days before, and the coordinating committee hasn't had time to have another meeting, even though they've already had one, to put things on the proposed agenda to send out to the public, and it wasn't on there, someone could, for example, we have an individual that ran for office this last, not this latest special election, but he would definitely be somebody that would need to see it in writing. So there was a rule. This was the 45-day rule. That is why it's not on there. It doesn't mean it's never going to be discussed. It doesn't mean it's not going to be on the list. But that two-tier system is in place for individuals to not feel slighted by other individuals, because you have to give some people an allotted amount of time. Am I making sense? I think I'm talking really fast.
I can add to that.
So then Natalie, myself, and Dan. Okay.
It is very easy to say, I want this on the agenda, and to be a proposal that's not well thought through. We approved at the steering committee a form to submit proposals. I was on the national coordinating committee, and for us to function efficiently, it was very important that a certain process we follow for proposals to be well thought out. Who's going to be in charge? What resources is going to take? What other, committees might be involved? Who is going to be in charge of, what's the structure of this proposal is going to be? So we do need a certain structure to submit proposals, and that's what it speaks to. To have a structure, it goes to the steering committee or to a committee, and then to the agenda committee. And sometimes proposals need to be well worded. It's sometimes a matter of wording, of being very clear and explicit about proposals.
It's easy to shout demands at people, put this on the agenda.
Yeah, it's just to be a little structure so we can work more efficiently at meetings. It doesn't preclude someone from showing up at a convention saying, hey, you know what, this happened and this, I think we should have this proposal on the agenda that we can include. But I can assure you that very likely at the convention, 2 or 3 of us are gonna sit down and write that agenda or write that item properly so that it is well thought out with resources in mind, who's going to be involved, what is it going to take to implement that proposal.
Yeah. So so myself, Dan, and Alan, I'm also in agreement with Melissa and Natalie for purposes of being organized, of having an idea of how the convention will flow ahead of time, and to have the ability to not have somebody try to hijack the convention for their own purposes, which sounds like it's been attempted in the past. So yes, I think that for organizational purposes and timeliness, we should have proposals submitted to us ahead of time that have been well thought out, or give other members of the Pacific Green Party the chance to discuss those proposals. So then we can come to the agenda organized. We already know what we want to discuss. We've already had some background discussion on it, so that the actual convention can flow more easily, we can get more accomplished. But yes, if somebody has comes to the convention and something recent happened and they say, I want to add this, I think it's the job of the state coordinating committee to try to leave a buffer of time in that instance. And so that's all I had to say, and then Dan and Alan.
If this is left as it is, what does an appropriate committee mean precisely? What kind of committee, who forms it, and who decides whether it's appropriate?
The SEC decides all those.
It'd be the agenda committee appointed by the SCC or the SCC if it's acting as an agenda committee.
Let's clarify that. Must be submitted to the steering committee or the agenda
Well,
committee.
it says,
No, I think any committee is fine, it leaves room for us to grow and have different kind of committees and.
whatever the agenda committee is, which we should want. What I'd say at this point, I think Seth originally suggested we just leave this as is,
Yeah.
because clearly it's gonna take more time to think through
Mm-hmm.
than
I
I
thought we
originally
had
thought.
Yeah,
So we'll table this one.
okay.
Okay, proposal 7, this is article, bylaw article 19F2. And the first sentence says, each party supporting member has the right to observe the work of any committee. I just want to add the phrase, has the right upon advance request to observe the work of any committee, so that it gives a committee time to know who to tell when they're gonna have a meeting or prepare documentation or whatever. In essence, it's saying, you take the right of any supporting member to observe the work of a committee, and saying, if you want to exercise that right, you have to let us know.
I saw 2 hands go up at the same time.
Seth and
Charles,
Charles.
you may have in mind to say the same thing. Why don't you go ahead, Seth?
In order for one to exercise the right, you kind of have to talk to somebody that you're gonna exercise the right in the first place, so I see this as kind of not necessary. Like, just, if they don't communicate with you that they're exercising this right to observe, yeah, like, I'm trying to figure out why it's necessary to actually put it in the bylaws.
Well, one of the things it says is they have the right of being informed of upcoming meetings. So who are you gonna inform unless they let you know? So you're saying it's superfluous to say that?
Well, we're not notified.
Can I,
Charles and Natalie, and I'm so terrible with names, can you tell me your name? Dilbert, okay.
the way this was handled in the past, or at least the primary way, was to put the announcement and phone number or whatever, contact information for any meeting, whether SCC or committee meetings, on the CC list. And so the plan was that anybody who actually wanted to know would get themselves on that list. And then they would have a way to come into the committee meeting, and even if they just want to listen. Which, I mean, it's that, just the transparency of putting it on the CC list it's a double, it accomplishes 2 things. One, it's transparency, so that anybody who wants to know can know what's going on. And the other thing is, then if you put the phone number or whatever is being used to get together in the agenda, in the announcement, and that way anybody who wants to join can. But that does not mean that the committee has forewarning.
Natalie? I thought you had your hand raised earlier.
Yeah, we should put when meetings happen and where they happen, and that's how people should be able to come on. What's happened is, for example, the steering committee, when we were having the conference calls, sometimes we had to change the time because one of us was not available.
Right.
And so it makes it a little bit more difficult to just keep that, outdated. If we're meeting every week and, like I have my daughter, or if you have a project, and so sometimes we have people who complain that they cannot get on the steering committee conference calls or listen to, and so I think that this speaks to that, to please let the committee know that you want to take part in the convention, in the conference, that's what it's.
Okay, so I guess my point is that, well, one would be that you propose the change on the list, but further that, I'm a little foggy, it was a long weekend.
Maybe we'll be on the website or whenever it's posted.
On the
is that
website would be good.
Every so often the meeting might change, please contact the committee if you want to take part.
That would be good, and then, but
But not
Maybe-
necessarily putting it in the bylaws or in the constitution.
right, I guess I'm supporting the idea that that's a little superfluous.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and Delbert and Melissa are in the stack.
All passage been covered.
Okay.
I guess what I'm hearing from what Alan was putting on you guys is, this is asking us to put the requirement on the individual that wants to be a part, and to put things on the calendar and change it would actually change the requirement for the committee themselves. So I guess I'm a little bit, I wouldn't want to make it sound like we are trying to deter anyone. You're not allowed to be a part of this unless you let us know in advance. I think that it would make more sense for us to somehow at least word it in such a way that the requirement goes on the committee rather than the requirement goes on the individual that wants to be a part. Because otherwise it makes it sound like we need to know you're gonna be there before you come, because we might change what we're gonna talk about, and we don't want that vibe.
I think my point was that's been the norm in the past, but I think it was a matter of procedure, of normal procedure rather than a bylaw.
Alan?
Yeah, the problem in my mind was not so much attending meetings as it says everyone has the right to be informed of upcoming meetings and receive emails sent among committee members. So, unless you know who wants to be informed, you have to think, how am I gonna make every supporting member aware when I'm gonna have a committee meeting? Especially when you change it at the last minute, or there's only a few people who have been discussing things. I don't wanna imply that, we should do everything secretly unless somebody knocks on the door and says, what's going on? It was more to say, you should let us know if you wanna exercise this right.
Natalie?
I suggest to strike it out as part of the constitution or the bylaws, and to just put it on the website or on our information.
Please let us know.
From time to time, the meetings might change last minute. Please contact the committee if you want to take part.
Rather than make it a requirement to.
Yeah, that would be more in line with practice,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're saying, don't make this change, but
Make it,
Make it go.
but the
Act
convention,
nicely, yeah.
the convention is gonna request the web persons to put wording that from time to time, the meeting of the committee may change. So if you want to participate, please
let us.
contact the committee.
so it'll be more of a practice than a bylaw.
Correct.
Any other questions about that? Suggestions? So, I'm going to have to take a short 5-minute break before we move on to the next item.
Good idea.
Point of order,
Dan,
we
yeah?
haven't voted on that.
It doesn't require a vote because we're not changing the bylaw.
Oh, I
It was
thought it
withdrawn.
was a proposal to strike F2 completely.
It's tabling it, I think.
No,
Yeah.
it was a proposal to add a phrase to that bylaw, but since we're not gonna add the phrase, we don't have to do anything.
Yeah. So,
I second the 5-minute break.
hi.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay,
You're
to
welcome.
attend the meeting, or we
Welcome.
hold
Grab some
that?
chairs.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And we're taking a 5-minute break, so.
Yeah.
Good time.
Is
Good
every-
time.
Does
the hustle
everyone
down.
else agree with taking a 5
I second.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I'll be back in just a few. Do you want to leave? Yeah, does someone else wanna?
Lunch is in half an hour.
I'll be back later.
I saw you last year.
Can I get your name?
And, I just let everyone know, I've been told that even though the bathrooms aren't gender labeled on the door.
There it says,
Okay, so there's one down the hall to the right that's for the men, and the one to the left is for the women.
No, I'm not. I'm a libertarian, but I am associated with Our American Initiative, which is tied to the.
Can I ask your name for the
lawsuit?
For the notes, can I ask your name?
Just for the, came in with your Greens.
Well, I was just listening to my husband tell him, technically, we don't really argue about that. I'm so strongly nonpartisan, it's kind of ridiculous.
You're welcome to sit in.
A lot of my faces.
Yeah, they're still around, but I'm not here today.
He's in a rush.
Yeah, maybe talk about it.
You know. There might be more people showing up after lunch. And I'm thinking you are Dale, I am Dale Johnston. You registered with us?
I was on it for him.
But you haven't been active for nothing.
It's my husband.
I'd rather
I've seen your website on Facebook.
Nice to meet you.
So, your wife, I don't, your friends came in.
Welcome.
He's also my best friend. You're anticipating running for Congress.
Welcome to your good notes because.
Oh, yeah, that is, that's like a vignette.
I'm not sure, I'm an environmental libertarian, curiosity. I've always been, kind of active with you guys. I was at the last year's this meeting. Quite good friends with, Emilio and Scott Green. Actually helped us design the Stein event, part of the, Our American Initiative / Level of.
So we got, what, halfway through that?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
That's the most important.
Anyway, I guess,
So we can move on and leave the rest of it.
You know what, the
Stop that right now. and move
large
on.
underlying issue in that last couple of discussions is ultimately who's in charge? Because the principal of the party is the convention.
We're not Greens.
And that's why the convention sets on agenda. Then there's all the just kind of practice.
Who is the convention?
Not all the ones that show up.
Yeah, that's the other, that's a big issue though.
Yeah.
Who constitutes the convention?
So for everybody that came a little bit later, there's gluten-free, sugar-free brownies. And if you want to know what the sugar substitute is, it's all natural xylitol. So, so it's not a carcinogen.
Just don't do it to dogs.
Yeah, just don't give it to your dog. But it, it's got chocolate, so you still wouldn't want to give it to your dog.
Was somebody know where the bathroom?
Down there, down the door to the right.
Turn right and it's on your left.
Thank you.
I saw somebody feeding their dog like chocolate bar.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no.
I was like, you know you're not supposed to do that, right? And he's like, oh, I do it all the time.
My dog's still here.
I'm like, okay.
It's just got kidney disease.
She was a big, I think she had.
I
I am more than willing to facilitate you guys joining the circle. It's a real simple thing to do, because I just took this table up here.
Well, let me help you with that endeavor, right? I like the way you're thinking, sir.
As long as it survives, it doesn't die of heart attack.
Hey, Tony.
I thought
Tony's feet,
it
Tony.
We had a
Okay, nice, we're gonna go for a round.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay.
Just know that if you sit next to me, you might be on camera.
That's not a problem at all. I apologize in advance for camera.
Ha. Well, you have a young man's face, you won't break it, whereas some of us.
While we wait for those, who are, it's just 2 people we're waiting on to come back, or 3 people. For everybody that's new who showed up, or who showed up a little later than when we started, we can go around the circle and state our name, and let's just keep it at our name and where we're from, since we kind of did that earlier. So I'm Jackie Devaney, and I'm from Astoria. I'm the chair of the Pacific Green Party of Clatsop County, and I'm on the state coordinating committee. Okay.
Donated homes, Lynn chapter, treasurer. Usually haven't been able to make it on this, thing for a long time. I work on Saturdays.
Mike Beilstein from Corvallis. Linda.
I'm Dan Cooley, I'm from Eugene, Elaine County chapter.
I'm Alan Zundell, I'm from the Lane County chapter as well. I'm also on the state coordinating committee and a co-chair of that committee.
I'm George Hutchinson, I'm from Corvallis. I have been on the state coordinating committee in the past for probably about a total of 10 years.
Charles Newland, also Corvallis. I've been on the state coordinating committee too.
Seth Woolley, Portland, currently on the coordinating committee and secretary.
Sam Gady, Portland area, and this is my first interaction with Green Party.
Dale Johnston, Oregon City.
Serena Johnston, Oregon City.
Melissa Wright, up in Portland, I'm on the state coordinating committee.
Melissa Carroll, Portland Metro Chapter.
Natalie Paravicini, I'm in Portland and on the steering committee.
Tim.
Oh, Tim Daney, Linden chapter.
Camden Leiter from Scappoose.
Drew Leda, we're technically from Northwest Portland, but we can throw a rock at Scappoose if you want.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is discussion of co-nominations, and then at noon we shall have lunch. Just a brief question about lunch. Someone had mentioned in emails that we might order pizza from somewhere, or there's a few restaurants nearby where we can go grab lunch. So is anyone, do we want to pitch in for pizza, or do we just want to kind of disperse and grab something and meet back here? Disperse?
Or, if a group wants to order pizza, we'll go ahead,
Yeah.
what's the problem
We're
there?
just gonna walk over to Posey's.
Walk to Posey's, okay, that's the best.
It doesn't seem that far.
Could ask it this way, is anyone interested in pitching in on a pizza?
Fend for yourself.
No?
Okay,
So you're all on your own.
Okay.
all right.
Alex,
So,
what are you nominating for?
so for the discussion of co-nominations, we were approached, I think by someone from the Democrat Party in the past who wanted us to co-nominate him. And so that's why we started to discuss whether we, as an entity, want to participate in co-nominations. And then a minor party came to us and wanted us to support a ballot measure for co-nominations. So I have a copy of that. It's quite lengthy, several pages long. Alan?
Yeah, this came up in the state coordinating committee, as you said, for two things came up. One was somebody approached us to run for Congress as a Democrat up in Greg Walden's area. Greg Walden is the only Republican in the U.S. Congress from Oregon. They didn't ask for our nomination, but they asked for a conversation. And so we wondered about if they did ask for a nomination, where would we be with that? And also someone from another party, I think it was the Independent Party, was proposing a change in the law having to do with co-nominations and who gets credit, because the current Oregon law is kind of ambiguous. When two parties nominate the same candidate, which party qualifies to use those votes for maintaining their ballot status? And they wanted to clarify that. I think that law just got dropped. They're not pursuing it because it's so near the end of the session, and I haven't heard anything from them in weeks. But it brought up the question of, do we have a policy on nominating candidates from other parties? And thus far, we have not. To my understanding, we've just done it ad hoc. When somebody asks for our nomination, we consider that. But we want to put it on the agenda to get a conversation about it, whether we should have a policy on co-nominations or how we should handle these kind of things.
Charles?
History again, and actually I got this from Seth originally. It's been our practice, was it ever a written policy that we don't nominate Democrats, or major parties, which now includes the independents. And there might be circumstances where we want to revisit that. One reason, I think I'm one of the people that called for discussing this, is simply that co-nominations are new. It's new law, and so we're still figuring it out. As he implied, because the law is still rather unclear. There have been plenty of co-nominations. I think we basically left it up to our candidates. And there are hints of a possibility in a state legislator's district. Alex isn't here, he's the one that somebody approached, that the Democrats, it's actually the district, it's a full county district, just to the north. 23, where Alex has run repeatedly, Alex Polikoff, but as a Green, and we would presumably nominate him as one of our,
It's one of our activists.
yeah, as one of our activists. So, but he's been approached by Democrats, and it's been a very right-wing, controlled by very right-wing Republicans. So basically, we've been approached by Democrats, feeling out whether he'd be willing to accept their nomination. Now, at this point, it's very speculative, but at least we should be thinking about this. And so that's the reverse situation, where rather than us helping a Democrat get elected, they might be helping a Green get elected.
Melissa?
I also really pushed for this to be on the agenda. It got brought to the state coordinating committee, and for multiple reasons, I opposed the co-nomination, but not completely. There was the provisions that I thought should be taken, and the reason for this was this thought of who's going to get the votes. The candidate decides. At what point does the candidate decide? Is it before or after the vote? When do the voters know who the votes are going to go to? Is that before or after the vote? Even if the Greens are, the Democrats are helping us, I think it ultimately will help them if they can somehow finagle and through their means that they always do, somehow get the votes, because we've co-nominated with them, and obviously there can be, to me, I don't really know fully the differences between nominating and endorsing. I mean, I think you can endorse a candidate and say, we like this candidate, without going through the full nomination process, where we have had a convention and Greens have said we want them to be our person. But I feel like if we're going to nominate someone and go through our convention process, there should be a clause in our vote that they sign that say, if the Greens are going to nominate this person, we are going to get their votes, because we believe in them as our party, and we're not allowing a window of opportunity anywhere for them to just change their mind for whatever reason, to give our votes to somebody else. So I really wanted to discuss this and look at all different angles that could possibly happen, good and bad, when co-nominating an individual.
Okay, Alan and then Tim?
The one thing I forgot to add is I asked the Secretary of State's office how they're gonna interpret the current law, because we have a new Secretary of State and a new Director of Elections. And what they told me was, whichever party files the, candidates have to file a form called the SEL 110 when they run for a minor party, run as a minor party candidate, and you have the opportunity to list a variety of parties on that and determine what order they're in. But the Secretary of State said whichever party's SEL gets filed first will get the credit for the votes. I should also clarify that this only applies to candidates who are running under a party label, which means like local offices generally are not included. It's candidates for the state legislature, for, higher office, and occasionally for like a county commission or something. But most offices are not even handled through party nominations.
Okay. Tim?
Well, Alan spoke to something I was concerned about, is what is current state law regarding co-nominations, or how it's decided who is the recipient of the votes, the party that's the recipient of the votes. And then too, the local candidates, which are not running, they're nonpartisan. And so those would be a case where a minor party or a major party could endorse, and that happens. But the other thing is interesting, because I was, under general strategy, I'll propose that we try to bring about a minor party gathering to discuss issues such as this amongst all the minor parties that we have available that want to come to a gathering.
I'm jotting that down.
Because this is going to be a future consideration for minor parties on how to increase their wins.
Yeah. Natalie? Oh, and then,
I actually have some, well, we didn't get very far, but some of us have been working on that, so, and actually under instructions from the last convention. So I'll report on our essentially non-progress.
okay.
When it's my turn.
So Natalie, Dan, and Charles, and Seth.
I think that it would be a good idea to get other parties, minor parties, to discuss this. I think that a big problem that we encounter as a Green Party is the fact that the electoral system is so skewed and it is so difficult to participate. So I think that what I would do personally is that if another party wants a co-nomination, that they have to explicitly say as part of their platform that they support electoral reform to make, to facilitate the participation, the equal participation of all parties, including in the debates at all levels. So that as a condition for co-nomination, that this must be part of their positions, stated positions and public positions.
Okay, Dan.
Well, there's other conditions that I would consider too. For example, we don't normally nominate candidates that are funded by corporate money. And if we co-nominate whoever, then that can just fly out the window, because you might end up like the Working Families Party and just a Democrat endorsing club.
Okay. And Charles, Seth, and then Mike.
Okay, so, actually, there's a technical point I want to make that's really responding to Melissa's concern. And it's that, basically, the major parties that hold state-funded primaries are allowed to nominate first under state law, actually basically required to. We can't file our SEL until after the primary. co-nomination with any of those three, they would have primacy, because they would file first, under the Secretary of State's. So that's a very real concern. That's where your concern really comes in. Now, the other thing is, and it's a matter of coordinating with the other, actually, the last convention requested that we try to increase coordination with the other minor parties. So Alex and I worked on that a little bit. All we have so far is some bullet points that I wrote down, both of those sort of got sidetracked. But, yeah, and it's something I've tried to do before. What Tim's talking about is trying to improve coordination with the others, and didn't get much response. So, what I wanted to do, and I sent the bullet points to Alex. I'll send them to the CC list too, because it's something the SCC should start thinking about. What I think should happen is that we send a letter to the other parties from the SCC. So from the authority, under the authority of the party, it was just from me personally before, and nobody paid much attention. I think if it comes from the SCC, that means, and is approved by the SCC, then I think we'll get more attention. But the co-nominations, they provide some opportunities, and there are really too many left-wing parties in Oregon. We're splitting our votes. So if we can combine, or at least coordinate our nominations well enough so that candidates who want co-nominations can arrange for them, I think all of us will do better. And there's very little difference between us and the progressives as far as ideology. There's kind of big strategy differences with Working Families Party. And the Independent Party at this point is in kind of an anomalous position, because they're actually a major party. So they would have the same advantage in a co-nomination, that the credit would go to them. Which, on the ballot, would just mean that they're listed first, and the others are the afterthoughts. In the case, if it's a statewide race, which is important to holding our ballot line, then that becomes very significant. Otherwise, it doesn't, on other races, it doesn't really matter very much, but on that one, it matters who gets credit for it. And I think in practice, we're gonna have to figure on running at least one statewide race that's just ours, just so everything's clear. I think that's what I had to say.
Okay, Seth, and then Mike, and then we'll probably adjourn for lunch, and when we come back from lunch, we'll continue this discussion, so.
So I was gonna mention what Charles has already mentioned about the major parties coming first in their nomination process. And, but also, Alan and I have been involved in some meetings with the other third parties at the request of the Secretary of State over trying to improve some of the language issues around the nomination processes and credit for co-nominations and things like that. And so there are some discussions that are going on and will go on with other third parties. And Sal Peralta, the Independent Party, is also kind of spearheading some of that work. I think he's the one that submitted the original. There's some more work that's gone on since then to change the language a little bit. So the current proposal you see, I don't think is the latest one that's up to date. But there are some discussions, so I think what we need to focus on is what we think we need for co-nominations, and then Alan and I and anyone else can later continue working through this group and with South Delta and the other third parties on how we would actually effectuate that. There's some question of how we would achieve it, any improvement to the system. but that, our discussions haven't gone into that. We've just been starting to talk back and forth with third parties.
Mike?
Well, I think as it is, and I think that it should be, that an actual nomination of any candidate, whether it's a co-nomination or it's a single nomination, is decided by a nominating convention. And so I don't think we want to, or I don't think, maybe we're not even able to put into effect some rules that would regulate when and how we do co-nominations. But I think we have a problem with our nominating conventions, our process already, that we don't have any sort of screening, except the convention. Whoever shows up at the convention, and asks for the nomination, and the decision is made at that convention whether they get the nomination. And I think, especially, we should do this with all nominations, but especially co-nominations. We should have certain criteria and have, and have some information about the candidates prior to the nominating convention. And I think it's more important than deciding about how and when, or whether we do co-nominations. We just really need to straighten out our nomination process so that there is some clarity, people coming in. And then I think as far as a co-nomination, then it's dependent on the convention to decide that. I think if we had a statewide candidate who was a Democrat who came to the convention and gave us good reasons why we should nominate him, then I think it would be up to that convention to decide when they're going to co-nominate the Democrat or a Republican or independent. And if there was good party reason to do it, then we could do it, and the convention should decide that. So I don't think we need any rules about it. What we do need is a process of screening and examining candidates prior to the convention.
Will we have enough time for Charles?
This is actually a speech I make at about this time every 2 to 4 years. And it's drawing directly from what Mike just said. We should start developing candidates, and I'm choosing the word developing, looking for people who want to run and starting a process with them as of this convention. And it's been a fault in our process all along, that it's been hard to start early enough. It should be basically a continuous process. It is with the major parties. So, sometimes we get lucky and really good people come in the door in the nominating convention. Sometimes we don't. So, a campaign, a really effective campaign starts about now.
A year ahead.
Yeah.
18 months ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's definitely something we can discuss under general strategy, I think. We've got 3 minutes left.
Take a break early.
Unless anyone else wants to speak, I have one more thing to add. So I think, Charles, you mentioned coordinating with minor parties to prevent vote splitting.
Sounds like he's already doing that. Although it's a different dimension of the same.
With the Progressive Party, we always co-nominate.
Yeah.
Virtually every case.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we generally do. There is some exceptions.
And
But
yeah,
90% of the time we do. For major parties, Democrats or Republicans, we have never done that.
And I agree, avoiding of vote splitting is important as long as that candidate is harmonious with our platform.